So at Unlocked Labs, we help increase access to education inside of prisons, and um, with a goal of building a national public infrastructure for education inside of carceral spaces. And I came to this work, as I like to tell people, organically. Meaning, when I was 16, I went to prison on a life without parole sentence. When I entered the prison, I was told that I would spend the rest of my life there and would end up dying there. And at the time, it was true. But over the years, the laws began to change, and that reality changed for me as well. And during that transitional process, I became acutely aware of the fact that when you go to prison at 16, or most any ages for people who are incarcerated, I didn't have any educational experience, nor was I getting any while I was on the inside. And so a lot of the work that we do now at Unlocked Labs was born out of not just my lived experience, but the lived experience of most people who are incarcerated, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And the original impetus for all that we do at Unlocked Labs was just to answer that question of how do you get access to education on the inside to prepare you to return to society. So as I, think back to like what inspired me to do this work is lived experience. Obviously, I hope that every day I'm not just doing it from that selfish point of view, but as I look around and I see there's 2.3 million people incarcerated in the United States, give or take, and the failure rate of return is, depending on who you ask, like 83%. 83% of people who come home will be rearrested within 10 years. And when I look around, and as I used to sit on the inside and look around, the deciding factor really seemed to be people's access to education to prepare to go home. And so even now, I had the opportunity to come home after 26 years and do this work for almost 2 now. I don't forget those realities. I don't forget that at the end of the day, what it's like to sit there and in some ways be afraid of walking out the door, knowing that the deck is stacked against you, in the sense of how are you ever supposed to pay your bills and survive if you don't have the employable skills necessary to make that happen. And the farther I get from prison, in some ways, there can be a concern that I would forget what motivated us to start this work in the first place. But one thing, 70% of my team is formerly incarcerated individuals that we trained to become technologists before they came home. So I'm constantly seeing that same reason play out. And luckily on the positive side now, where we help people upskill and now they're employed and they're contributing. And sometimes I go back into prisons to do deploys and talks with people, and I see that same issue still stands. And so not only does it motivate me to do the general work of increasing access to education, but it also motivates how we do the work. We are dedicated to building an open source public infrastructure. And those two things are very specific meanings in our world. Open source because hopefully more people will adopt this, and eventually this will become a national or maybe even global solution. Public in the sense of we believe this is something that the government eventually should be supporting and doing on its own. And hopefully we do our job really well. We disappear one day because we're not necessary, because the government has this infrastructure in place, and higher ed providers and education providers have it in place. But it guides our business model. It guides how we operate. It reminds us that we're just here to build opportunity. And so it also affects the fact that we're a nonprofit. We don't necessarily think that this is a space where people should, seek profit, while at the same time we're trying to prepare people to be part of society. So I would say that my experience that brought me here and the experience of my team that brought us here informs our everyday decisions about how we approach the work of increasing access to education. It's kind of funny to look back on my life and say, once upon a time when I was a teenager, I was told I would die in prison. And then, 26 years later, I'm living a really good life in the sense of, it's full of great experience. And so it can be hard to decide what's the most inspirational thing, because life itself is inspirational. But every now and then I get to go into a prison to give a talk about my path and what got me here and what I think my future looks like. And the most inspirational thing is when somebody looks at me from those incarcerated spaces and says, if you did this, I can do this. It's the most inspirational thing. That's the reason we're there. That's the reason we talk. If we give people hope for a future where their life matters and where they are considered a valuable member of society, that's inspirational, especially considering some of the spaces I've been into. And that also leads to my hope for the future, that one day we will live in a world where we don't think that people should be thrown away, where we don't think that people are irredeemable. We think that people just need some services and opportunities. And with those two things, we live in a world where people just get the help they need to be the best people they can be. I think one of the things that's important for people to know about our work and what we're trying to do is that at the end of the day, two things. One, that justice-involved individuals are sometimes the best suited folks to solve these problems. I mean, my development team has roughly 2 centuries of time of being incarcerated. So they've lived these problems. They know them in and out. And if we can just provide the training that these folks need, you'd be amazed what solutions they could come up with. The second thing I'd like to say is that we look at this as a community problem, right? It's a problem everywhere. It affects every community. And so if we're going to solve it, it takes a community solution. That's part of the reason we're open source. We want people to join into Unlocked Labs, not as a business, but as a community of people trying to solve this problem in the most humane and logical way possible.